I really hope that it touches some people. I hope that it helps them with some confusions that they might have. I hope that it gives them permission to think out the box, maybe get in touch with who they really are, or to better understand, somebody else. I can't even put into words what a difference it might have made for me to be able to have had this information when I was growing up. You ever find yourself having questions and confusions and things about gender identity, sexuality? Do you ever find yourself asking things like, aren't gender and sex the same thing? Or male and female, isn't that just all that there really is? And aren't they completely opposite from one another? Do you find yourself wondering, well, what does binary mean? And what does it mean to be transgender? What are people talking about? And what's this stuff about pronouns? And why would a single person want to be called they? And does any of this have anything to do with me? Should I even be concerned about all of this? Well, if you do, you're not alone. I'm Reverend Deborah Johnson, RevD. We're going to spend some time unpacking some of this, taking a look at some misconceptions, some myths, taking a look at some new paradigms and ways of looking at things. Trust me, I have been thinking about this stuff literally all my life. All my life. And from my own personal experience, I can tell you that things can get a little bit more complicated. We want things to be really, really simplistic. And in that drive to try to make things simplistic, sometimes we can create like a nice, neat little box, a little framework, and we just want to stuff everything in that. And then if anything doesn't fit that, it's like it blows our mind and we don't know what to do with it and we don't know where to put it. Having had a lot of experience in this, not only in my own personal life, but in my professional life as well. I've been a professional diversity trainer for decades and have had lots and lots of experience in talking about these kinds of issues in numerous environments, from institutes of higher education to Fortune 500 companies, governmental agencies, a variety of places. So I can tell you that whatever questions that you may have, that you're not alone. This little time that we're spending together is also serving as an intro to a primer for an upcoming workshop that I have on July 13th, 2024, where we're going to be going into more depth in terms of some new models that I've created with graphic depictions about how we can better understand these things. But core to our ability to make sense out of it all is we have to debunk some very common myths. Now, I'm going to be doing some screen sharing with you to make it a little bit easier to track and to follow. I put together some notes that I want to share with you. So I'm going to bring them up on a screen share and you can follow along with me. So there are 4 myths that are, I would say, the primary ones that need to be debunked in order to make any kind of sense about what we're talking about when it comes to gender. So myth number 1 is the idea of opposites, okay? That somehow or another, male and female are polar opposites, mutually exclusive, that they're just completely separate. Okay, they don't have any kind of intersection. They don't have any kind of overlap. It's just like apples, oranges, like completely different things. Then there's myth number 2, this idea of either or. And what myth number 2 is the myth of the binary that says that every person is exclusively, they are 100% male, they are 100% female. That's it. There's nothing else. End of story. The third myth is what I call mated conception. It's this idea that at the point of absolute conception, that people are conceived as either being males or females, like it is this immutable, ordained event. And it happens right then, and that's it. And everything else follows completely out of that. And the last myth that we're going to be talking about and debunking here a little bit is this idea that biology and identity are the same thing. So biology has to do with sex. It has to do with your physicality, your genitals, and your outer, bodily characteristics. Identity has to do with your self-perception, okay? How it is that you see yourself in regards to your sexuality, and that these are not, as we're going to see, not as just clear cut in either category, and that one and the other do not always occur on the same page, that one's sexual biology does not necessarily control their identity. But the myth is that they should, that somehow or another it's a done deal. If you've got this look externally, that's it. There's a certain way you should feel that is in alignment with that. But as we'll see, the identity part has to do with social norms. It has historical context. It has religious like overtones, ethical issues. And there's nothing consistent about that. So if you were to take a look at, say, hundreds of years ago, and you were to look at a picture of the signing of the Declaration of Independence or something like that, you'd see all these men in wigs and white powdered wigs, which was the sign not only of masculinity, but of a superiority. Today, if those same men showed up in those wigs, people would think that was effeminate and that it was not a sign of masculinity or any kind of superiority. And they'd probably say, oh, well, those are a bunch of folks in drag. Okay? So it's not solid. It's not immutable. How we see what's feminine or how we see what's masculine or what's appropriate behavior for males or what's appropriate behavior for females, that's very fluid. That's very fluid. So identity is very fluid. And as we'll see, the actual anatomy and biology is much more fluid than we would think that it is as well. So as we go about the business of debunking these particular myths, we're going to take a look at how human beings are actually made. Okay. So it may sound a little scientific here, but I'm trying to make it as simple as we possibly can. So we can just kind of wrap our arms around it. So take a breath. Just take a breath. At conception, we are neither male or female. Just let that sink in for a moment. we are neither male nor female. So each human being has 23 pairs of chromosomes. We have 46 chromosomes. And these pairs, they're pairs because we get some from the mom, biological mom, and some from the biological father. Now, of these 23 pairs, 22 of them are exactly alike. For males and females, there's absolutely no difference. They're called autosomes. Now, when the egg is actually conceived, that is referred to as an undifferentiated zygote. Okay? And at that point of conception, it's not male or female, but what will become male or female is all growing along the same path. You know, think of it kind of like silly putty or something like that, where it's the same materials, it's the same like tissue, so to speak, the same, essential stuff. And at a certain time, it may turn into female or it may turn into male, but it's the exact same stuff. So the 22 pairs are the same for males and females, but there's one pair that's not. Okay, that 23rd pair of chromosomes differs. And that particular pair is what determines the baby's sex. Okay? So what happens is that the mother carries an XX in terms of chromosomes, and the father carries an XY. So it's actually males that wind up determining the sex of the child, because the female is just carrying the female X's. And then depending upon whether you get an X or a Y from your father is going to determine what winds up happening from there, because you're getting the X or Y and which one gets activated in terms of the father. So here's what happens is that there is the release of a particular testosterone that would happen around week 6. And if that release happens around week 6 after the conception, then that's going to turn into a male. If it doesn't happen, and I want you to hear what I'm saying, if it doesn't happen at all, if it doesn't happen right at 6 weeks, it's a little early or it's a little late, any kinds of stuff can happen. Okay. If it doesn't happen at all, then it's going to be female. Okay. But if it does, there's any combinations of things that could be going on. Okay. So depending upon the levels and the timing of this hormonal release, any number of combination of things can be going on, both internally and externally. Okay. So take a breath here. Take a breath. Because there's something that rarely gets talked about, which is that many are born neither male nor female as far as their biology is concerned, their external genitals, or they are both male and female. Just let that sink in for a second. So in the USA, 1 in 2,000 newborns, that's statistically significant. Okay, 1 in 2,000 is a lot. We could say it's a common occurrence. 1 in 2,000 newborns is what we now call intersexed. Growing up, they might have used the term hermaphrodite, but we say now intersexed. And what that intersexed means is that they are possessing what is referred to as ambiguous genitals. Ambiguous, where there's ambiguity. where it's really not definitively male or female. Okay. Or it's visibly both. It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of male and it's a little bit of female. So just take a breath and let that sink in for a second. Okay. Now, what has been a common practice in the United States is for the medical profession to do what is called a gender assignment. In those instances when they've got like a little bit of both, they will do some alterations on the child before they even let the child leave. Until recently, they were doing it without even telling the parents. And it was causing a lot of complications with people because they didn't really know. So one's internal organs may not be consistent with one's external genitals. They may be different. In fact, I just saw an episode on a show, The Resident, where they had this female athlete, but she had testicular cancer. And they were like, whoa, no signs of that on the outside, but that's what was going on with her on the inside. And it takes really invasive kinds of procedures to find out what's going on inside. And quite often with babies and infants, it's really too early for them to do those kinds of invasive procedures. So they really don't know. They just really don't know. Okay. So let that sink in just for a second. We don't know. You don't know what's going on with someone, and you cannot tell all of the time if you were literally looking at them, like all their private parts, but without even looking at their private parts, you really don't know. You don't know what people are or what's going on with them. And last thing I want to say about this now is that every person has both male and female hormones. Everybody. It is necessary for our health to have both male and female hormones. Now, we have them in different combinations between those that we say are biologically male or biologically female, but even that is not static. Over the course of one's life, those hormonal levels will fluctuate. And even the fluctuation of those hormonal levels will make a difference in how you self-identify. So let's just say you're a male, you have certain hormonal levels at 6 that are different than 16, that are different than 76, and your perception of yourself as male is going to fluctuate depending upon all those different levels of hormones like within you. But in order for us to be in a balance, we have to be at peace with and have the right balance between the masculine, the feminine, the estrogens, the testosterone. And sometimes for our health, we're given different kinds of remedies. When women go through menopause, there's certain drops. You might need to add this or add that. But it's very, very complex. And none of us have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the understanding, or I would dare say even the right to make some sort of judgment about what's going on in somebody else's life. Okay. So let that just sink in for a second. We are creating laws. We are ascribing, behaviors and forcing gender conformance on people before the baby's even born. We're having gender reveal parties and everybody's slating the life of this person before they're even born, based upon the biology of their sex. And you're going to like this color, and you're going to want to play these kinds of sports, and you're going to want to wear these kinds of clothes and do this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And that may not fit. It didn't fit with me. It really didn't. I've, through the years, become more balanced in my yin and my yang. But I'm telling you now, growing up, I wasn't having it. I was such a tomboy. And I always knew that I was gay. So all of this stuff about what I was supposed to be or to not be, it didn't make any sense to me. It's like it just didn't make any sense to me, and it wasn't true to my authentic self. Okay? So given this, I'd like for you to think about it, and I'd also like for you to share it with people. And the upcoming workshop that I have on July 13th is going to go into more in-depth, like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for us in terms of our identities, and how does that form? And what does it mean if it's not mutually exclusive? What does it mean if it isn't just binary? What does this mean if I can feel some way and physically be another way? How does all of that reconcile? How do we speak of it? What kinds of pronouns do we use? And why are people choosing those pronouns? And what I can tell you is that this is not just some like social political thing, but our understanding, a healthy understanding of this blend where everything is both masculine and feminine, is going to be important for everything, not only our personal health, but how we wound up even treating the planet. I do a lot of prison outreach work, particularly with male prisons. And I tell you now, if we had allowed these men the opportunity to grieve, to feel emotion, to communicate, to do a lot of the things that we would consider to be like soft or feminine, if they had been allowed to embrace that, they wouldn't be in prison today. Okay? They wouldn't be in prison today. The kind of hypermasculinity that they were pushed into was just toxic. And they've had to learn in prison how to bring that balance. So I contend that the understanding of all of this is beyond important to liberate ourselves, to stand in our authenticity, to stand in empowerment, and most especially for us to stop abusing and oppressing each other based upon mistruths and misconceptions. Okay? We're in a very heightened social political time where there are a lot of decisions that are being made on misinformation. So we can clear the air if we can make some sense, if we can have some more empowering conversations. We're all going to be better off for it. I thank you for joining me now. Once again, I'm Reverend Deborah Johnson, RevD. My website is RevD Now. You can go there to see the workshops and the offerings and things that I have. And I would love to see you for more in-depth discussion July 13th in my workshop, Gender Made Simple. Thank you for coming, and I hope to see you at the workshop. I really hope that it touches some people. I hope that it helps them with some confusions that they might have. I hope that it gives them permission to think out the box, maybe get in touch with who they really are, or to better understand, somebody else. I can't even put into words what a difference it might have made for me to be able to have had this information when I was growing up. That it was so challenging. It was so excruciatingly painful, the amount of like oppression and repression, the amount of racial overlays, religious overlays, just all of these different ways that who I was in terms of my sexuality, in terms of my gender identity, in terms of my sexual orientation, that there were all these like rules and regulations and preconceptions about who I could be or who I shouldn't be, or what was right or like what was wrong. And it just was squeezing me and choking me. Literally, at some point, it felt like it was killing me, literally. And I know as I dug deeper into these issues, and particularly as I became an activist and in the feminist movement and an activism in the early gay liberation movement, as well as the what we were calling then the Black Power movement, it was to get out from underneath all of that and to just find room to breathe, okay, where all of the things about whatever, God's not going to love me because I'm gay, or because you're a woman, you can't be the leader. I can remember, relatives, your job is to stand behind a good Black man, or if you keep doing this, nobody's going to want you. And, you're not going to be able to get married, and your place is here, your place is there. And it just like, no. And right now, my heart, it bleeds. It just bleeds for the type of discrimination and legislation that's going on now against the transgender community, particularly the youth. All of these ideas about like they're trying to be something else, or they're trying to change. They're not trying to be something else. They're trying to be what they are. They're trying to get some consistency between what their body looks like and who they know themselves to be. It isn't like they're one thing trying to become something else. That's what they are. When we deny the trans youth this opportunity to be able to be themselves, it's literally a death sentence. I mean, it really is a death sentence. It is ludicrous to say, well, they're too young to make these decisions and they need to, grow up. And then when they're older, they can decide if they. No. Do you know how traumatic it is for a trans kid to go through puberty? What it's like for a trans girl, somebody that knows she's a girl, to start to grow physical hair and have a penis and all that kind of stuff, or the reverse. And to know, like, I'm a boy and I'm menstruating and I'm growing breast and stuff, it's like, oh no. And it's so interesting because we don't do that to what we call cis-conforming, where there's conformity between how people see themselves and what their body is. You know, we're not telling those kids, well, you better wait because you don't really know who you are. You don't do anything. You can't define yourself as a boy or a girl. You know, you don't know. How can you possibly know? We do the same thing with queer youth. Like, you're only 15, you're only 14, you're only 16. You know, how can you possibly know? If a straight daughter comes telling you how she's got the hots for some boy, you already thinking about birth control. You're not like, well, how do you know? And maybe you don't. You don't tell the 17-year-old football player, how are you going to know you're only 17? You can't make a decision like that. No. To deny gender affirming when we are doing gender affirming about everything else for the conforming kids. Everything, from their clothes to their nails, to their haircuts, to their sports, to everything, to the prom, to like all of that. It's just affirmation, 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 affirmation. And then we're going to tell the trans kids, no, you can't have any. I'm reminded of a conversation with this woman who had a trans daughter. Kid was about 11 and was wanting to do the puberty blockers. And the woman was sharing with me a conversation that she had with her husband. And she said, well, here are your choices. You can raise a son or you can bury a daughter. Those are your two choices. You don't have any other choices. Our kid is not going to go through puberty. They're not going to do that. So we may be thinking that she was our little girl, but that's not who she thinks she is. She's a trans boy. She's not going to go through that. She will take herself out first. So what are we going to do? And that's the position that we're putting all these kids in. And it's not fair. And it's not right. And it's not based on anything medical. No matter how much people say that they're trying to save them, it is just their religious dogma. Because even the medical professions and the psychiatric professions are saying, give them the affirming care. That's what's healthiest for them. So we have choices now. We can either learn the facts and act accordingly, or we can try to let a certain group of people and whatever their theological perspectives are become the law of the land for all of us. based on ignorance. You got your choice. All I can do is help put some information out there. Hope it makes sense and hope it's a blessing in some way.